A young nurse saved the life of a little girl when she got attacked by a lion in the zoo, unaware her parents are billionaires. In a flash, her life was changed forever. Juliet was on a 2-week leave from work. She had traveled from London to New York to spend quality time with her family, her mom, and 2 younger siblings. Since the death of her father, life hadn't been easy, but she kept going, determined to hold her family together. One afternoon, Juliet decided to visit the zoo for some sightseeing, a quiet escape from the weight of her responsibilities. As she strolled past the lion enclosure, a sudden scream pierced the air. Juliet's heart raced as she saw a little girl, no older than 5, frozen in fear. The girl had been part of a school field trip, but now she stood helpless as a lion, having escaped its enclosure, crept toward her. Without thinking, Juliet sprinted into action. She scooped the girl into her arms just as the lion lunged. Its paw grazed Juliet's arm, leaving a deep gash, but she didn't stop running until a zookeeper managed to tranquilize the lion. Blood dripping from her arm, Juliet focused on calming the terrified child. "You're safe now," she whispered, brushing the girl's hair from her tear-streaked face. Paramedics arrived, treating Juliet's wound and confirming the girl was unharmed. Minutes later, a sleek black limousine pulled up, and 2 frantic figures emerged, the girl's parents. Juliet's jaw dropped as she recognized them. Global billionaires and philanthropists. The mother hugged Juliet with tears in her eyes. "You saved our daughter's life. How can we ever repay you?" Juliet smiled through her pain. Knowing she's safe is enough. Juliet's arm throbbed as she sat in the back of the cab, watching the New York City streets blur past the window. The city was alive with movement, yellow taxis honking, pedestrians weaving through traffic, and neon lights flickering against the dusky sky. Her mind, however, was elsewhere. The adrenaline from the rescue was wearing off, leaving her drained and aching. Her wound was neatly bandaged, but the emotional weight of the day sat heavier than the physical pain. As the cab turned onto a quieter street in Queens, Juliet felt her heart beat a little faster. It had been almost a year since she'd last seen her mom and siblings. Work had kept her in London, and the distance had made her feel guilty. She'd missed birthdays, school events, and countless little moments. But now, for the next 2 weeks, she had a chance to make up for lost time. The cab slowed in front of a modest brick apartment building. Juliet paid the driver and stepped out, her suitcase rolling unevenly on the cracked pavement. The building was old but well-kept, with flower pots lining the narrow stairwell leading to the entrance. Juliet took a deep breath, her pulse quickening as she climbed the steps. Before she could knock, the door swung open. Juliet, her younger brother, Ethan, practically launched himself at her. He was 11 now, taller than she remembered, with a mischievous grin and bright blue eyes. Behind him, her 8-year-old sister, Emily, hovered shyly, her dark curls framing her delicate face. Their mother stood in the doorway, hands covering her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Juliet dropped her suitcase and wrapped her arms around Ethan and Emily, pulling them close. "I missed you guys so much," she whispered into their hair. They clung to her like they were afraid she might disappear. Her mom stepped forward, her face a mix of joy and exhaustion. "Juliet, you're really here." Juliet stood and hugged her mother tightly. Her mom's frame felt smaller than before, thinner. Juliet noticed the faint streaks of gray in her hair and the dark circles under her eyes. "Mom," she murmured, "I'm home." They stepped inside the apartment, which was small but warm. The living room was tidy, with a few framed photos on the walls, most of them of their father. Juliet's chest tightened when she spotted the photo on the mantelpiece. Her father holding a much younger Juliet on his shoulders, both of them laughing. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to focus on the present. Emily tugged at Juliet's sleeve. "Are you staying long?" Juliet smiled and knelt to her level. 2 whole weeks. Emily's eyes widened. "That's forever." Ethan grinned. "We're going to make you play soccer with us." Juliet laughed. "I'll try, but I'm not promising any goals." They settled around the small wooden dining table. Their mom brought out plates of spaghetti, simple but filling, and they all dug in. Juliet hadn't realized how hungry she was until she took the first bite. "So," Ethan said between mouthfuls, "what's it like being a nurse in London? Do you get to see blood and stuff?" Juliet chuckled. "A lot more than you'd like to know about." Emily wrinkled her nose. "Gross." Their mom smiled faintly, but Juliet noticed how quiet she was. Her mom's hands trembled slightly as she poured water into their glasses. Juliet knew the stress of holding the family together after her father's death had weighed heavily on her. The bills, the mortgage, Raising 2 kids on her own, it had left her mother stretched thin. Juliet wished she could do more to help, but working overseas made that difficult. "How's school?" Juliet asked, turning her attention to her siblings. Ethan shrugged. "Okay, I guess. We had a science fair last week." "Did you win?" "No, but my volcano actually erupted this time, so that's a win in my book." Juliet smiled. "Sounds like you're a genius in the making." Emily rested her chin on her hand. "My teacher says I'm good at reading." "That's because you are," their mum said, smoothing Emily's curls. Juliet's gaze lingered on her mother's hand. It was thin, the veins prominent beneath the skin. Her mother was working too hard. Juliet knew the long shifts at the small bakery downtown weren't enough to cover everything, but her mother never complained. After dinner, Juliet helped clear the table. Her mum stood beside her at the sink, drying the dishes. "You don't have to do this, you know," her mum said softly. "I want to," Juliet replied. Her mum's hand brushed Juliet's wrist, where the fresh bandage from the lion attack was still visible. "What happened?" Juliet hesitated, then sighed. "It's nothing. Just a long day at the zoo." Her mum raised an eyebrow. Juliet hesitated before saying, "I helped someone. A little girl. A lion escaped its enclosure, and her mother's hand shot to her mouth." "My God, are you okay?" "I'm fine." "Really?" Her mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You could have been killed, but I wasn't." Juliet smiled faintly. "And the little girl is safe." Her mother's shoulders sagged with relief. "You always were brave." Juliet's chest tightened. "Not always." Her mum turned toward her, eyes soft. "Since your father died, you've been holding all of us together. You've been brave even when you didn't have to be." Juliet's eyes stung. I didn't want to lose anyone else." Her mum pulled her into a hug. "You won't. We're still here. And we love you." Later that night, Juliet lay in the small bedroom she shared with Emily. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting silver streaks across the walls. Emily was fast asleep, her small body curled under the blanket. Juliet brushed a strand of hair from Emily's forehead and smiled. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message. "Unknown number. Juliet, this is Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery. Please call us when you can. We would love to thank you properly for what you did for our daughter." Juliet stared at the screen for a moment, then set the phone down. Tomorrow could wait. For now, all that mattered was that she was home, with her family, where she belonged. As sleep crept in, Juliet's mind drifted to the lion's roar, the girl's terrified eyes, and the calm that followed when she knew the child was safe. The events of the day felt surreal, but one thing was clear: life was about to change in ways Juliet never imagined. Juliet stood at the base of the gleaming Manhattan skyscraper, staring up at the illuminated penthouse windows. The sheer height of the building made her stomach turn, but that wasn't what unsettled her. It was everything this place represented: wealth, privilege, a world so far removed from her own that it felt like another universe. She shifted on her feet, adjusting the strap of her handbag. The navy blue dress she wore, her nicest, suddenly felt too plain, too modest. What was she even doing here? The doorman cleared his throat, offering her a polite smile. "Miss, they're expecting you." Juliet forced a nod and stepped inside. The lobby was breathtaking. Polished marble floors gleamed beneath a chandelier the size of a small car, and gold accents adorned every column and corner. Even the air smelled expensive, a mix of fresh flowers and something subtly musky, like aged leather and wealth itself. Her heels clicked too loudly on the pristine floor as she followed the doorman to the elevator. "Penthouse suite," he announced, pressing the top floor button. Juliet swallowed hard as the doors closed, trapping her in her reflection against the mirrored walls. She barely recognized herself. Her hair, brushed and styled into loose waves, framed her face in a way that felt unnatural. She had even applied a bit of mascara and lipstick, something she rarely did. Her fingers brushed over the small silver necklace around her neck, her grandmother's. It was old, slightly tarnished, but wearing it grounded her. The elevator slowed, and a soft chime signaled her arrival. The door slid open, revealing a long hallway lined with modern art and warm lighting. Before she could knock, the door at the end swung open. "Juliet." Mrs. Montgomery's voice was warm, filled with a kind of relief that made Juliet pause. The woman looked effortlessly elegant in a deep green evening gown, her dark hair swept into an artfully loose updo. Without hesitation, she pulled Juliet into an embrace. "I'm so glad you came," she said, stepping back with a radiant smile. Please, come in. Juliet followed her into the penthouse and stopped short. The space was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the living room, revealing a breathtaking view of the Manhattan skyline. The Empire State Building stood tall in the distance, its lights twinkling like stars against the darkening sky. The apartment was sleek yet inviting, with plush cream-colored sofas, a grand piano, and walls adorned with art that probably cost more than Juliet's yearly salary. But before she could linger on that thought, Mr. Montgomery appeared, dressed in a tailored suit without a tie, his smile warm and genuine. "Juliet," he greeted, extending a hand. "It's wonderful to see you again." She shook his hand, still taken aback by how normal they seemed. "Come." He gestured toward the dining room. "Dinner's almost ready." As she followed them, small footsteps pattered across the marble floor. Juliet, the little girl she had saved, ran toward her, curls bouncing, her bright eyes filled with excitement. "You came," she squealed, throwing her arms around Juliet's waist. Juliet knelt to her level, smiling. "Of course I did. How are you feeling?" "Good," the girl beamed. "My friends at school couldn't believe what happened." Juliet chuckled, glancing at the Montgomerys. "It's still hard for me to believe, too." Mr. Montgomery let out a deep laugh. "She's been telling the story nonstop." Juliet smiled, her heart warming at the sight of the happy, safe little girl in front of her. The dining table was set for 5, adorned with crystal glassware and silver cutlery. A floral centerpiece sat elegantly in the middle, filling the air with a soft lavender scent. The food smelled divine: roasted lamb, buttery mashed potatoes, asparagus drizzled in a rich sauce. Juliet hadn't had a meal like this in ever. "Please, sit," Mrs. Montgomery urged, pulling out a chair for Juliet. She hesitated, then slid into the plush seat. Conversation flowed easily over dinner, much to Juliet's surprise. The Montgomerys asked about her work, her family, her life in London. "You've done so much for your family," Mrs. Montgomery said after a while. "It must be difficult, being so far from them." Juliet hesitated. "It is." She set down her fork, feeling the weight of the truth pressing against her chest. "I moved to London for better opportunities, but it's hard. My mom works herself to exhaustion, and my siblings are growing up so fast. I just wish I could do more for them." A soft silence followed, filled only by the distant hum of the city. "You're incredibly strong," Mrs. Montgomery said gently. Juliet smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. As dessert was served, a decadent chocolate mousse, Mr. Montgomery stood and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a sleek white envelope and set it in front of Juliet. "This," he said, "is for you." Juliet blinked. "What?" Mrs. Montgomery smiled. "Go on. Open it." With hesitant fingers, Juliet slid the envelope open. The check inside made her breath hitch. $200,000. Her stomach turned. She shook her head, quickly pushing it back toward them. I can't. This is too much." Mr. Montgomery leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Juliet, you saved our daughter's life. But I wasn't expecting anything for it," she insisted. She swallowed, her voice faltering. "I couldn't stand by and do nothing." Mrs. Montgomery reached across the table, resting a hand over Juliet's. "That's why you deserve this." Juliet's throat tightened. "We know you didn't do it for a reward," Mr. Montgomery said. "But this isn't about money. It's about gratitude. This is life-changing money, yes, but you changed our lives first." Juliet clenched her jaw, fighting back tears. She thought of her mother's tired eyes, her brother's worn-out sneakers, her sister's growing pile of schoolbooks. She thought of the overdue bills, the sacrifices, the nights her mom stayed up counting pennies just to make sure the rent was paid. This money could change everything. Slowly, Juliet closed her fingers around the check. Her vision blurred as she whispered, "Thank you." Mrs. Montgomery squeezed her hand. "You deserve it." As Juliet left the penthouse, the check tucked safely in her purse, the crisp night air wrapped around her. The city stretched before her, vast and full of possibility. For so long, she had given everything to keep her family afloat. But tonight, for the first time, she allowed herself to dream. Because maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new. Something better. Something hers. Juliet stood outside the familiar red brick apartment building, the cool night air brushing against her skin. The streetlights flickered faintly, casting soft pools of light on the cracked pavement. Her heart pounded beneath her chest as her gaze lifted toward the fifth-floor window, where a faint glow peeked through the curtains. Her fingers curled tightly around the small envelope in her hand. Inside was a check, $200,000, an amount that seemed too unreal, too massive to comprehend. Juliet had stared at that number at least a dozen times since leaving the Montgomery's penthouse, half expecting the ink to dissolve into thin air. But it remained there, black and bold, spelling out a future that had suddenly cracked open before her. She took a shaky breath and pushed open the building's heavy door. The worn-out carpet in the hallway, the faint smell of fried food from the neighbor's apartment, and the buzz of a distant television, all of it was so achingly familiar. Her feet carried her toward the staircase. The elevator hadn't worked for as long as she could remember. Juliet climbed the 5 flights, the weight of the day pressing down on her shoulders. When she reached the apartment door, she paused, fingers hovering over the knob. Then, drawing in a steadying breath, she pushed it open. The scent of home wrapped around her immediately, the faint aroma of her mother's lavender-scented candles, the lingering trace of the pasta they must have had for dinner. The small living room, the modest and worn, radiated warmth. Juliet. Her mother's voice came from the kitchen. A moment later, her mother appeared in the doorway, wearing an old cardigan over her nightdress. Her face lit up at the sight of her daughter, her dark hair pulled back into a loose bun, exhaustion shadowing her eyes. "Hi, Mum," Juliet said, her voice soft. Her mother's expression shifted to concern. "What's wrong?" Juliet hesitated, her hand tightening around the envelope. Before she could answer, 2 smaller figures burst from the hallway. Juliet, her younger brother, Ethan, and sister, Sophie, ran toward her. Sophie, all skinny limbs and tangled curls, launched herself into Juliet's arms, followed closely by Ethan, whose glasses slid down his nose as he hugged her waist. "You're home," Sophie squealed. "We missed you," Ethan added, his voice muffled against her sweater. Juliet laughed softly, wrapping her arms around them. "I missed you too." They pulled away, their wide eyes shining. "Did you really save that girl?" Sophie asked, her voice filled with awe. Juliet smiled. "I guess I did. I told everyone at school," Ethan said proudly. "Of course, you did." Juliet ruffled his hair. Their mother watched them with quiet warmth, but the tiredness in her eyes betrayed the weight she carried. Her gaze slid toward the envelope in Juliet's hand. Juliet followed her eyes, her heart hammering. "Sit down," Juliet said softly. Her mother's brow furrowed. "Juliet, what is it?" Juliet crossed the small living room to the kitchen table. The table was old, its surface scratched and worn from years of use. A pile of unpaid bills sat at the corner, half hidden beneath a magazine. She set the envelope down carefully. Her mother sat, her hands resting on the table. Sophie and Ethan slid into the chairs beside her. The 3 of them watched Juliet closely. Juliet took a deep breath. I need to tell you something." Her hands trembled as she slid the check from the envelope and laid it flat on the table. Her mother's eyes narrowed as she leaned forward to read the numbers. The color drained from her face. $200,000, she whispered. Juliet nodded. Her mother's eyes flicked up, disbelief and confusion warring on her face. "Where, how?" Juliet's throat tightened. "The Montgomerys gave it to me. After I saved their daughter." Her mother's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her hand hovered over the check, as if touching it might cause it to disappear. "They wanted to thank me," Juliet explained, her voice low. "They said it's not a reward, it's a gift. To help us." Her mother's lips parted in stunned silence. Sophie leaned over the table, her small face scrunching in confusion. "That's a lot of money, isn't it?" Juliet smiled faintly. "Yes, it is." Ethan pushed his glasses up his nose. "What are we going to do with it?" Juliet's gaze softened as she looked at her siblings. She had spent so long trying to hold their lives together, stretching paychecks, working long shifts, worrying every day that they would lose the apartment. Now, for the first time, there was breathing room. "We're going to pay off the bills," Juliet said. "Mom won't have to work so much anymore. Ethan, you can finally get new glasses." Ethan's eyes widened. "Really?" Juliet nodded. "And Sophie." Sophie leaned forward, practically vibrating with excitement. "You can take that ballet class you've always wanted." Sophie gasped. "Really?" Juliet laughed. "Yes." Her mother finally spoke, her voice choked with emotion. "Juliet." Juliet turned toward her, her own eyes glistening. Her mother shook her head, blinking rapidly. "I don't know what to say." Juliet slid her hand over her mother's. "You don't have to say anything." Her mother exhaled shakily, then stood and crossed the space between them. She pulled Juliet into a tight embrace. Juliet sank into it, her chest tightening as her mother whispered, "I'm so proud of you." Juliet's eyes stung with tears. "I couldn't have done it without you." Her mother pulled back, her hands framing Juliet's face. "You've always taken care of us. Maybe now, it's time to take care of yourself, too." Juliet's breath caught. Her mother's eyes softened. "What will you do now?" Juliet hesitated. For so long, her life had been about survival, working endless shifts to keep food on the table, sacrificing her own dreams for the sake of her family's security. But now, "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe I could move back to New York. Be closer to home." Her mother's brows lifted. "Really?" Juliet nodded. "I've been working so hard to make things better for us, but I think I've been missing out on life." Her mother's smile was soft. "You deserve to live a life that makes you happy." Juliet's gaze drifted toward the window. Beyond it, the city stretched out in a sea of lights. For the first time, the view didn't fill her with dread or longing. It felt like a promise. Her siblings were already chattering excitedly about what they would do with the money. Ethan was talking about a science camp, and Sophie was reenacting a ballet routine in the middle of the room. Juliet's heart swelled. After years of struggle, of working herself to exhaustion, of feeling like the weight of the world was on her shoulders, it was as if that weight had suddenly lifted. For the first time in a long time, Juliet allowed herself to feel it. She stood and walked toward the window, her gaze sweeping over the glittering city skyline. Juliet touched the necklace around her neck, her grandmother's. The future had always felt like a closed door. But now it felt wide open. And this time, she wasn't afraid to walk through it. Juliet stood by the window, the soft hum of the city drifting through the thin glass. The lights of New York glittered against the night sky, casting a golden glow over the horizon. Somewhere in the distance, a car horn blared, followed by the rhythmic wail of a siren. But Juliet barely noticed. She had been home for almost 2 weeks now. The days had passed in a blur of laughter, long talks with her mother, and quiet moments with Ethan and Sophie. For the first time in years, Juliet wasn't rushing between shifts or worrying about how the bills would get paid. The check from the Montgomerys had changed everything. Her mother had immediately paid off the overdue rent and the stack of unpaid utility bills. Ethan got new glasses, and Sophie had enrolled in her first ballet class. They had gone grocery shopping without the usual tension of calculating the total in their heads. Even the apartment seemed lighter now, freer, somehow. But the biggest change was happening inside Juliet herself. Her 2-week leave from the hospital in London was nearly over. Tomorrow, she was supposed to board a flight back to her old life, the relentless shifts, the constant exhaustion, the feeling that no matter how hard she worked, it was never enough. But as she stood at the window that night, Juliet knew deep down that she wasn't going back. Her mother's voice drifted from the kitchen. "Juliet." Juliet turned to see her mother standing in the doorway, drying her hands with a towel. She had just finished washing the dinner dishes, a task that Juliet had offered to help with, but her mother had gently refused. "You okay?" her mother asked. Juliet hesitated. "Yeah, just thinking." Her mother's gaze softened as she stepped into the room. "About going back?" Juliet's fingers brushed against the silver necklace around her neck. "Yeah." Her mother sat down at the small kitchen table and gestured for Juliet to join her. Juliet hesitated for a moment before sitting down across from her. "What's on your mind?" her mother asked. Juliet sighed. "I don't think I want to go back." Her mother's brow lifted slightly, but she didn't look surprised. Juliet leaned forward, her elbows resting on the table. "Mom, I've been running for so long, working nonstop, trying to make ends meet, trying to hold things together. I told myself it was the right thing to do. But since I've been home, I've realized how much I've missed." Her mother's gaze softened. "You've done so much for us, Juliet." "I know," Juliet said, "but I barely had time to live my own life." She exhaled slowly. "I don't want to go back to that." Her mother reached across the table, resting her hand on Juliet's. "Then don't." Juliet's eyes widened. "But my job, you'll find another job," her mother said gently. "A job that makes you happy. You don't have to carry everything on your shoulders anymore." Juliet's breath hitched. "But I'm a nurse. That's what I know how to do." "Then be a nurse here," her mother said simply. Juliet blinked. "Here. There are plenty of hospitals and clinics in New York," her mother said. "You could work close to home. Close to us." Juliet sat back, the idea taking root in her mind. Could it really be that simple? Could she build a life here, with her family, instead of feeling stretched across an ocean? "But I left New York for a reason," Juliet said quietly. "You left because you were trying to help us," her mother said. "You don't have to do that anymore." Now it's time to help yourself. Juliet swallowed hard. Her mother's eyes softened. You don't owe anyone your exhaustion, Juliet. A lump formed in Juliet's throat. Her mother smiled faintly. Stay. Juliet's heart squeezed. She had spent so long feeling like her life was built around survival. But maybe now, it could be about something more. That night, Juliet lay awake in bed, the city lights flickering faintly through the thin curtains. Ethan and Sophie were asleep down the hall, their soft breathing comforting in the quiet. Her mother's bedroom door was closed, but Juliet knew she was awake too. She could always sense when her mother was thinking. Juliet's phone buzzed beside her pillow. She picked it up and saw an email from the hospital in London. Her manager was confirming her return date and shift schedule. Juliet stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she tapped the screen and hit reply. Her heart raced as she typed, "Thank you for the opportunity, but I've decided not to return at this time. I found a new opportunity closer to home. Best wishes." She hovered her thumb over the send button, and then as she hit send, her heart thudded in her chest. No turning back now. 2 weeks later, Juliet stood in front of a small brick clinic in the heart of Brooklyn. The sign above the door read, Riverside Community Clinic. It wasn't large or fancy, but there was warmth to the place, a welcoming feeling that reminded her of why she had become a nurse in the first place. She adjusted the strap of her bag over her shoulder and took a breath. Through the glass door, she saw a woman behind the reception desk, talking to a man holding a young child. A nurse in blue scrubs passed by, her face kind and familiar. Juliet smiled faintly. She stepped inside, and the receptionist looked up. "Hi," Juliet said, her voice steady. "I'm here for the nursing position." The receptionist smiled. "Of course. Dr. Evans is expecting you." Juliet followed her down the hallway, the faint scent of antiseptic mingling with the low hum of conversation from the exam rooms. Dr. Evans stood at the end of the hall, a tall woman with a confident but kind expression. "Juliet, right?" Dr. Evans smiled and extended her hand. Juliet shook it. "Yes. Welcome to Riverside," Dr. Evans said. "We're excited to have you on the team." Juliet's chest warmed at the words. She followed Dr. Evans toward the staff room, where a row of lockers lined the wall and a bulletin board overflowed with flyers for health fairs and community events. The room felt lived in and comfortable, like it belonged to people who genuinely cared. Dr. Evans stopped at the door. "Ready to start?" Juliet smiled. "More than ready." As Juliet changed into her scrubs, a quiet sense of peace settled over her. She had spent years working herself to the bone, believing that happiness was always just out of reach. But now, standing in this small clinic, knowing her family was safe and stable, Juliet realized that happiness wasn't something she had to chase. It was right here. She glanced at her reflection in the mirror, the silver necklace resting against her collarbone. A new life, a new path. If you enjoyed this story about Juliet, her incredible bravery, and how her life changed after saving Lily, the little girl at the zoo, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us create more engaging content for you. We'd love to hear your thoughts on how the story ended. How do you feel about Juliet's decision to stay in New York and start a new life at the Riverside Community Clinic? Do you think she made the right choice? What do you think about the Montgomery's generosity after she saved Lily's life? Speaking of Lily, how did you feel about her role in the story? If Juliet hadn't been at the zoo that day, things could have ended very differently. Do you believe fate played a role in bringing them together? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, don't forget to rate the story on a scale of 1 to 10. We'd love to hear your feedback. And finally, drop your location in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see where our viewers are tuning in from. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you in the next one.